You are listening to Get Real Podcast.
It is so good to be back in the fishbowl and not jacked up on Dayquil like I was for the last two editions.
You were dancing with the bears last
That
time.
was not a lot of fun. We did have some great interviews and some good times, but I am back. I'm 100% now. And today I would like to do what we used to call in the 80s. Remember the Nestea commercials where they told you to take the Nestea plunge?
Yes.
We are going to take the Nestea plunge today. We're going to take that plunge into the subgenre of metal that has moved me and inspired me the most. As a matter of fact, it's the subgenre that inspired the book that I wrote, Stones That Cry, inspired this podcast and to kind of move forward. And that subgenre is symphonic metal. And something that you and I have discussed a lot is that time that I was in the spiritual desert where God was still with me, but I really wasn't with him, where I was detached from the word. I wasn't praying. God would use the subgenre of symphonic metal to minister to me. I would hear him speak through it. I would feel empowered by it. I'd feel inspired by it. It would strengthen me, encourage me, and I knew that he was still with me through that subgenre. When I would listen to bands such as Within Temptation, Nightwish, Serenia, Camelot, all of those bands, there was a message in their music to me that really helped me get through those very, very dark times. So that stirred in me the question, and I've been wanting to do this particular podcast for quite some time because my question has been, how is it and why is it that God always seems to work through the symphonic? It's a mystery. Because if you take a look at music history, let's go back and take a look, probably one of the greatest symphonic pieces ever written, and you don't have to be a believer at all to agree with this, is Handel's Messiah.
Yeah.
It's a great piece of music. And there's also other pieces of symphonic music that really glorify the Lord. You have Hector Berlioz, you have L'Enfance du Christ, which was about Joseph and Mary and Jesus going to Egypt to avoid Herod. That's what that whole piece is about. And then even you have Mozart's Piano Concerto 21 in C major. Boy, I'm just jamming out the music history today, aren't I? Just jamming it out. And as I was taking a look at this, I had to do some study because I just don't know why God moves in the symphonic. And I'm starting to understand why. But even the Swiss Reformed theologian, Karl Barth, what he would do is he would listen to Mozart every day, and it would get him in touch. It would open up his mind to the divine. So in pursuing this question and getting ready for this podcast, there were some things that God showed to me that are just really kind of cool about the symphonic. First of all, symphony comes from the Greek word symphonia, which means in accord, means in agreement. It means in unison. Those are all things that the word symphonia means, and that word is actually used several times in the New Testament. But then if you take a look at the antonym of symphonia, you have discordance, disunity, incoherence, and violence. So when you look at symphonia, you have really the very nature of God in unison. An epiphany that I had, revelation, is that the Trinity itself is symphony. Because you have three distinct, interdependent, but dependent persons that work together. You have the Father, you have the Son, and then you have the Holy Ghost. So God himself is symphony. There's all these different things going on at one time.
That's heavy, man. The Dayquil is doing you justice.
The Dayquil did me some justice on this one. And then I went back to my seminary days because one of the things that we talked about in seminary a lot was the harmony of the Gospels. Because if you take the Gospels and read, you can read them independently, but then when you put them together, you get the full story. You have to read each of the Gospels. And when you take a look at through Scripture itself, you've got all of these different voices, all of these different melodies, what is called in symphony and music composition counterpoint, where you have one melody and then you have all these different melodies built under, and they all rely upon each other. They're intertwined, but they each have a different sound. They have a different rhythm or a different cadence to them. So you take a look at the voices of the prophets, the apostles, the Gospels, everything in the Bible. You've got all these different voices, and they're all moving in a movement. In symphony, they talk about movements, all moving together differently, but in the same direction. And all of these different voices in Scripture, the symphony of Scripture points to the glorious work of Christ on the cross.
That's really cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive in a little bit deeper, and we're going to talk to my friends Joey Pike and Alicia Boyd from the symphonic Christian metal band Amaris. There are not very many symphonic Christian metal bands. There are not. And we have them on the line with us today to talk to us a little bit about what they do. We're going to talk about symphony. So, Joey, we interviewed you a couple months ago, back in October.
Yes.
Yes. And we were getting ready to go see our favorite symphonic metal band, Delain, and we were both pretty pumped before the show. I got to talk to you before the show. So, what was your take on that show? How'd you feel when you came out of there?
Oh my goodness, it was absolutely wonderful. It's like one of my favorite bands, and I've been following them for a number of years, and to be that close and so intimate in such a small setting, and seeing, not only hearing the music, but also being so close to the stage and seeing the facial expressions and the motions of the guitar picking and the intricacies of the drummer, and looking at his style, which is really difficult to kind of see when you're really, far back. But I was like inundated with music, and it was phenomenal. And I thank you so much, Glenn, for coming down and sharing that with me. It was phenomenal. It
was a blessing to take you for your birthday to go see that show, how that all worked out. And we traveled down with that tropical storm that came through in Florida the night before Tropical Storm Nestor. That was a wild ride. That was a lot of fun.
It's a good venue. Yeah. It's a good tight venue to be able to
It is. And I was talking to some friends last night. I was talking to them about the hens in the street and the roosters in the street in Ybor City. Right. Yeah, now you have that. Before we really take that nesty plunge, Joey, can you share with our listeners, I was not there when you first met my wife, when she was showing you a house. Oh. And she wowed you with her symphonic metal knowledge and what you did and how that came up. Can you share that? It's really funny.
Oh, it was absolutely hilarious. So she was showing me around some houses that I was considering purchasing, and we pulled up to the house that I actually ended up purchasing. I parked the truck, and I had Symphonic Metal just blaring. I don't remember if I was actually playing a Delain song. It may have been one of my originals or one of the two. And then your wife parks, and she kind of walks up, and she's like, "What are you listening to?" Or she said something like that, and I'm like, "You probably wouldn't know. It's Symphonic Metal." Not a lot of people. She goes, "Yeah, I know Symphonic Metal." I'm like, "No, you got to be kidding me." She's naming off like Delain and Epica, and I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." She's, "Oh yeah, my husband and I, we're into this, and we're into those types of bands." I'm like, "Oh my God." I thought it was one of those like divine providence kind of a moment that I was able to actually meet you two, and to kind of share this genre of music, and also our Christian faith together, and it was meant to be. And like I said, it was funny because most people in the United States, the majority of people, don't know about that genre, and I just assumed that she didn't know anything about it. Being a realtor, I don't want to stereotype realtors as like not into that type of music.
And it helped her close the deal with you, and I thank you for purchasing that house. And Mac the Metal Dog appreciates that as well, because that resulted in more Scooby snacks. So it's all good. Alicia, thank you so much for being on with us today too. I mean, Joey is in Florida. Hey. Alicia is in California. I mean, we are just like coast to coast. Welcome to Get Real Coast to Coast.
I think that's the first time.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was sunny here, but it's overcast in California.
Oh, it's not sunny California.
I have the cold that you just lost. So.
And I don't think I gave it to you on the phone the other night. I don't think it works that way. Yeah, this is the first time that we've gone coast to coast at the same time.
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, that's really cool. Man, we're expanding our horizons.
Yes.
This is
you guys are going big
cool.
time now.
Oh, man.
We are. Alicia, can you share with us a little bit about your background in music and singing?
Yeah, I've kind of done it all. I started out, singing in choirs. My mom heard me in the bedroom singing, and so she said, "I'm gonna, put this kid in a choir." So I did a lot of church stuff, a lot of choirs, and I came from my stepdad had been a Catholic priest before he married my mom, and then I was raised in the Lutheran church, so lots of hymns. We sang lots of hymns with harmony parts. Then I in college, I got into jazz. My parents really kind of saw that gift in me, and my dad was like, "You need to go to this jazz class, or go audition." And, so I did, and I got in and just learned all about vocal jazz. and learned about improvisation and all of that. And then the voice teacher that I was taking from, I did the vocal music program, and part of that was, the classical side. So we did chamber music and all of the great pieces of music that are out there, Requiem and, just beautiful stuff. And during that time, I had to have a private voice teacher as part because I was, a voice major. And so I ended up going with a woman who I love her. Her name is Sarah Franklin, and she had her master's in piano from Juilliard and her master's in voice from Juilliard. And so I got to train with her, and she's also this beautiful spirit-filled woman who just loved me. And so we would just have these beautiful times together, and I learned everything that I've got from her and my other teacher, Jim Heiner. So anyways, loved them. So from there, I ended up, growing into auditioning for opera and different things like that. I never did a principal role, but I ended up doing a lot of chorus work, singing with National Geographic at Davies Symphony Hall in San Francisco for their World Tour album. Then, let's see, Sarah Brightman. I got to sing with Sarah Brightman. She did a gospel type of album, and I got to sing with her, Phantom of the Opera.
Well, Sarah Brightman, I mean, I grew up listening to that soundtrack. I wore it out, the Phantom of the Opera soundtrack. I was so into that.
It was like a dream, right? Because I'm a soprano, and I was singing those songs, or trying to sing those songs. That was my dream. And then to be on stage with her, she was incredibly nice. She was beautiful. Yeah.
I've got so many Sarah Brightman albums on the rack over here. My family and my uncle in Canada, Uncle $, Uncle Rich, who really tuned my ear into good music. He's a big Sarah Brightman fan as well.
Yeah, she was just beautiful. She really took the time to say hi to everyone and let us all feel embraced, making sure we're all okay, It was amazing.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Now
and then Amaris, hello.
And here you are, yes.
Yeah. I love Amaris.
How did you make that transition from classical to opera to symphonic metal?
Well, I had been doing little side things where I would sing Pat Benatar, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, or I don't know, something from Heart. I kind of like it all. My brother is 7 years older than me, and he was a rocker, and I was pretty much a rocker in high school, and I've always worn all black. I just can't get out of it, I was kind of a little bit goth, a little bit rocker, but I really like the hard rock. I come from the 80s, so, yeah, I love hard rock.
Did you have a jeans jacket?
Yeah.
I knew it!
I had all of it. All of it.
I had a few of those.
The big, massive hair. I had it.
Oh, do you have any pictures of that? That would be fun.
Oh, my. Yes, I do.
I had a major mullet.
I don't know if you'll get to see those or not.
And I bet you...
I would be more than happy to share my mullet pictures.
You had a mullet?
Yeah, it was... I look back, there was that was the thing, and everybody had one, and I'm looking at these pictures like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
Joey, I didn't have one, so no, everybody didn't have one.
The scary
I had
part,
the mullet. I didn't know there was another haircut.
I had a mullet.
Everybody upstate New York like that.
Wait, did you just hear that? I said
You had a mullet?
I had a mullet.
Oh, man.
I had a mullet.
Did?
Like, it was even going into the girls' realm where
Oh, my
girls
goodness.
had kind of mullet-ish,
Lisa, we definitely need to see that.
Yes, that is very worthy.
Joe Dirt, right?
Yes.
They're coming back, actually.
Yeah, they are.
Well, we're in Somerville. That's what's happening.
And then
I don't know if it ever left.
That'd be totally cool.
So, Alicia, you did jazz, and one of the things we were talking about the other night in prepping for this, and this is a question that Dan and I have had, and I kind of want to touch upon it a little bit. There's some people that say that, well, there's really no order to jazz. There's no logos behind it. It's just kind of there. It's just random. Can you share with everybody what you were sharing with me the other night about the order of jazz just a little bit?
Yeah, jazz is actually really complex, but the truth of it is that it's just that basically when you hear that way out there stuff, what has happened is they have, so there's a structure. There's a structure to jazz. There's a structure to music. And so what happens is they go outside of the structure, but they're still staying within this safe region where it's not going to sound weird. You're not out of the key. You're not out of, there's nothing that's so far out there that it's not going to sound good. And so you really have to understand a little bit about music theory, or it's kind of innate, where you're just kind of holding that structure inside of you. So I remember when I was first learning this that Jim Heiner would always say to me, or in the class, that you need to really understand the base of the song first. You need to know that melody inside out before you can improv on that structure. And then you begin to explore, well, what would it sound like if I went a fifth above or a fifth below or a third above, or, and then what would it sound like if I threw in a seventh note, and so we just get to explore those things, but you really have to understand what your boundaries are. So it's kind of what I call organized chaos, There is always an order to it, definitely.
You're absolutely right. That reminds me, because my music background, I played trombone, and I played both in jazz. I played jazz trombone.
Hey, Glenn, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute, but I think as part of us being twins, I think we share that we both played trombone.
Oh.
I played trombone in middle school.
That's crazy.
We were separated at birth. I know it. I knew it. Yeah, I played jazz trombone, and I also got to play in a symphony orchestra. And I'm going to go back and talk about that in a little bit, because that really changed my style of playing. But when the conductor would hand me a piece of music, and I was first chair for jazz trombone, it would say solo, and it would just be this big empty space on the sheet of music. So what I had to do is understand what was going on and then just improvise based off of that. So yeah, that does make sense. That's the order in it. I never thought of that.
That's like great training, though. Wow, that's like amazing ear training that you got right there.
Yeah, I kind of wasted it, and I think it's time to pick it back up. There was no such thing as symphonic metal at the time that I knew of. And if there was symphonic metal at the time, I would still be playing the trombone, and I'd probably be traveling Within Temptation or something like that, doing their backup for trombone,
I love jazz.
Hey, if we ever get to the point where we get like really big and we have an orchestra back us up, you're in.
All right. Hey, yes. Okay, I'm going to quit my full-time job now in the hopes and expectations.
Jazz is really relaxing to me, and even complex jazz. Now, I don't really dig smooth jazz that much, but like just really good jazz with a lot of rhythmic complexity and a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
It's like it scratches some part inside my brain that I can't get to. It just kind of calms me down. Maybe it's ADD. I don't know.
My dad was really into jazz. That was his favorite type of music, was jazz. If you go through his record collection, there's a lot of jazz records in there that he had.
Yeah, that's where I got my love for jazz also, was my dad. He was listening to the way out there stuff, and then he would listen to Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she's like the ultimate for me. But then, later there were people, I don't know, like Barbra Streisand kind of is a little jazzy, but was it Linda Ronstadt got really into jazz for a while?
Even if you look at Pink Floyd's music, they kind of veer more towards the jazz side from what I've picked up from listening to them.
Yeah, some of the songs, definitely. Alicia, isn't there a place called Yoshi's in downtown San Francisco that does a lot of jazz? Yeah,
I think it's Oakland, but yeah, they do have some really great acts there.
Right.
Some famous singers and musicians that come.
Yeah, and it's primarily a jazz place, and I think I've been there a couple times. One of my best friends, Dana, a little shout out to you out in San Francisco. He's a music teacher, and his thing is the drums, and he used to be in multiple jazz bands. And I remember when I first met him, he was in a band called, and check this name out, Snape Jacobs Church of the Bearded Skeptics.
I like them already.
I'm like, I don't know why did they. I was trying to understand what the kind of music is. I mean, it has an underlining kind of jazz theme to it. But he said, well, kind of imagine Pink Floyd jazz on crack. I'm like, okay. But it was very obscure. They tried to push the boundaries of that type of genre or the type of music they were putting together. But I do agree with you both that jazz tends to be very complex because of the liberty that each player gets in the underlying structure of the song.
Right. But then they all have to come back together with that structure. They have to stay together somehow. You can't go too far out, and you have to be able to, at any moment, reel it back in to that structure.
Kind of sounds like the way the world of the spirit works in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
It really does. There is logos in jazz. Dan, we've been pondering that for about a year now.
Yeah.
That's a question we had. Joey, so you started with trombone and then you picked up drums. The drums just seem to fit you so well, your personality and Animal from the Muppet Show.
Oh yeah. And I really do think that any drummer, when they started out as a kid, or even if they didn't start out as a kid, they always looked at him as like an inspiration. So before I get into the drum part, I'm actually going to bring it back to the trombone.
Okay.
Now, I didn't want to do trombone.
I didn't either.
Because all the drum positions were already filled.
Oh.
And Mr. Perfetto, I think he's still doing the organ in upstate New York. He's like, well, we have some trombone positions open. I'm like, all right. And I didn't enjoy it. I remember doing the wah wah and Elvira. And the wah wah part. That'll forever haunt me. But so I wasn't able to actually do the drums at that time, and I actually didn't continue music in high school. I was big into sports, and I tried carrying a trombone in one hand and my sports bag in another in a bus going into the high school.
Never works.
Music. Oh, it was awful. And the teacher had me. I remember the music teacher. He had me on the schedule for like a year and a half, and I kept telling him, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. I didn't show up to one practice, and I guess he really needed a trombone section in the high school, but I didn't do that. So fast forward, it was probably around early 2000s. I had a little extra money to spend and kind of like dive back into my music love. Now, prior to that, I was actually playing guitar and singing in church choir, so I already did that in the mid-'90s, but I always wanted to get a drum set. So I just happened to get a drum set in 2004. I started playing, and then within probably about a year and a half, I picked it up very easy. I actually started a classic rock band, a band called The Remedy. And the lead singer is Rebecca Connolly. She's back in, she actually just put out an album. She's back in Scotland, her hometown, but she was in Southern California for a while. But I think it was something that maybe my family always had kind of rhythm to them, because my uncle used to be a drummer. My cousin Jimmy, who's probably about, I think he's about 10 years older than me, he's been in a band his entire life, and I always looked up to him, so he was also another inspiration to actually get on the drum sets, because it was just absolutely wonderful watching him play. And even now when I go back to visit in upstate New York, I try to check him out if he's playing live somewhere around there. So I've always wanted to do the drums, like I said, and I just took the chance in the early 2000s to do that. So that's my drumming history.
When we first went out for those steaks at Longhorn Steakhouse, you shared with me something where I had to fight back the spirit of covetousness really, really hard. You told me and shared with me that you had the opportunity to spend some time drumming with Casey Garillo, the former drummer from Camelot. Can you share about that?
Oh, that was, that is one of the pinnacle moments in my music career. So, my band, before Alicia, we were playing around the San Francisco, San Jose area, and we had many gigs in San Jose, probably more in San Jose than we did in San Francisco. And there was this guy who had a business that happened to show up at one of our gigs down there, and he really loved us, and he ended up showing up like at every gig that we went or had. And he befriended us, and then all of a sudden he comes up to me. He goes, hey, "By the way, do you want a drum lesson by Camelot?" I'm like, I thought he was joking at the time. He goes, "No, I'm serious." I'm like, "What do you mean?" So he's like best friends, good friends with the guitarist, and at that time I think they were having shows up in the Chicago area. He calls him up, and he convinces them to fly to San Jose to have a one-time squeeze-in gig, primarily not only to actually, to go to the concert, but also to pull Casey out to give me a personal drum lesson. I'm like, wow. I couldn't believe that all came together within a couple months. And so he picks up Casey. I think it's probably around noontime, probably coming off of the plane. I'm not sure, maybe the hotel he was staying at. They go to his studio, and Casey kind of sends me through some of the basic rudiments of drumming, and I was just like in awe. And I actually, he had got me on the drum set, and he was kind of showing me some different techniques, and I'm like, can I just watch you play? I didn't want to get on the drum set because awesome. I just wanted. I'm like, oh my god, I'm like behind the drum set with Casey Grillo.
I mean, their songs rhythmically, the power metal ones are just intense. The percussion behind it and the work that goes behind that. So Amaris, that's an interesting name, and you sent me a list of names that you were thinking of, and we'll go through a few of those, but. Amaris, what does that mean? And it's beautiful. It fits a symphonic metal band perfectly. So
I looked it up. I think it means beloved of God or something like that. But I don't think they knew that when they. Right. It has something to do with love.
You're right about that, and I wasn't thinking about that. And Alicia's bringing up a good point. I mean, if you look at the basic of that word, amor, it means love, right? Amore. Yeah. And so I really like that part, that description of that name, but just the way it sounds awesome. And I send you Glenn, and I think Alicia too. I think I sent a list of the names that we were kind of like brainstorming. And
I was having a good time with that, like thorium, the radioactive heavy metal, and
like you picture Thor with a hammer, right?
I gotta be honest with you. I spent months brainstorming and changing words and looking up like Greek translations and Latin translations, and I wrote down anything that actually sounded kind of cool.
I noticed that.
I'm looking through this list, and I'm like, oh, that would still be kind of cool.
You had on there Millicent and all sorts, and I was starting to have fun with it. I was like, okay. I was coming up with a few. I was like Malox, or
you find out like your favorite.
That's a good one.
Your favorite's like a hemorrhoid cream, and you have to change. You're like, oh, I had the perfect name, but they got to it.
It's not really what the name is; it's how you say it. Zyrtec.
Okay, so the one that I was really pushing, it wasn't actually Amaris, but the one I was really pushing for was Symphonic Distortion.
That's good.
But my first guitarist, Derek, he goes, I think there's a band that's already named that, and I kind of look it up. I'm like, yep. Actually, there were several bands like that. Well, that's not unique enough, so that didn't get. I think it was part of the voting, but it didn't get the highest vote. So Amaris won the votes, and I was really happy with that because it just.
It's good.
It's good.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's memorable. I mean, it's got the beautiful flow that symphonic metal has to it.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
So for both of you, God uses you. God uses your genre to speak without question. How do you feel that this is such a natural flow for God to use this particular genre, especially through you?
Well, I just feel like it comes out of who we are. And, Joey just loves God, and so do I. And so kind of, who you are melts into that. And, I thought, if I'm going to use this voice, anything that I do, I feel like you could be picking up trash and glorify God, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just do it to the glory of God, right? But when we started first writing songs, I said, let's just pour into this and ask God to give us the words. And
Mhm.
a lot of that came out of my personal time with God. But it's just really like the world. It's dark and it's light at the
Yeah.
same time, you know? And
Yeah,
I love that part of it. Yeah.
that's beautiful, and I totally agree with her. And I think one of the wonderful things about being with Alicia is that we both really shared our Christian faith, and that we decided early on that wherever we were going to go with the new music, that it would be positive, Christian like, yes, and then people can actually kind of look at some of the words and some of the, even we may not use the word Christ in the songs. I mean, we could, but it's always going to have some kind of a positive message and nothing, really negative. And like she said, the world is so full of negativity. But there's also a lot of positivity, and the positivity is where God comes and shows us this. And I see that and hear that in this music. There's the metal, the distorted, down-tuned guitars, which is kind of reality of who we are as humans.
Right.
But we have this beautiful, angelic female vocals coming in, and also the symphonic backing that says that, yes, you're in this world, but you're not of this world, and here I am. So it's like it's showing us our humanity, but not only just our humanity, but also that God works through it.
That is
Yeah.
That's powerful.
beautiful and powerful at the same time. That's the best way I've ever heard it described.
Yeah.
The combination
Yeah.
of everything there. And that really kind of sets in, like, why does God use this particular genre? And Joey, you just said it, because you've got the down-tuned guitars. That's our humanity. That's our sin. That's the muck and the mire that we go through.
Right.
And that's what the world is we're living in this muck and mire, but
Right.
God
Yeah.
is moving through the muck and mire.
Right.
It's all about His grace. And one of the things that both Alicia, we talked about this the other night, and Joey, we've talked about this, that even in bands that are not, they don't fit the Christian genre of symphonic metal,
Right.
but bands like Nightwish, Within Temptation, you'll listen to them and be like, are they believers, or what's going
Yeah.
on? And Alicia, you talked about that a little bit the other night, about the gifts and how the gifts are without repentance. Can you share that with our listeners, please? It's so beautiful what you
Yeah,
said.
I mean, the word is really clear that the gifts are without repentance. And so when we were created in our mother's womb, and, God thought of us before the foundation of the earth, He said, I know your name, and I know what I have created you to do. Those, they were meant to do whatever they're doing. And so that voice, or that ability to write songs, that ability to put all of this symphonic stuff together, that was given by God. Anything good is given by God. And so they're just sharing what they were created to do. And in that comes, out of that comes God. And I figure if God could use a donkey or a pillar of fire or a burning bush, he could use anyone. And they're just basically sharing what God has given them without even knowing it. And we were all created in His image, and so we're just kind of sharing that part of us. We all, it's like this, the world is this epic story, this epic love story, and everybody has that God hole inside of them that is this romantic love story.
Yes.
Yeah, and we all just have that passion to share it. That's why we like romance and drama and all of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That is, especially with symphonic metal, because a lot of it is very, very romantic, the way that it's written and the way that it's presented. Ghost Love Score from Nightwish, very romantic.
Oh my God.
Romantic song.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Every time Dan and I see that live, it just sends chill bumps up our spine. It's like, every time.
Yeah.
And it's just nailed perfectly.
I watched this YouTube last night of an opera singer watching Floor sing that song. And she kept getting surprised, going, well, it's classical, but it's not. And then the awesome thing about that song and about this genre for a female singer is that it's so challenging because they're moving back and forth between, hard rock and roll and maybe some kind of really gutsy, deep sound to something really light and lyrical, and then going back into I'm going to belt this, and it's like every range of what a voice could do. It's really challenging.
It's interesting you say that because you take a look at just Nightwish's album Dark Passion Play. It starts out with the poet and the pendulum. I mean, we're talking crunchy amps. I mean, they're just letting it rip.
Crunchy, I love that word.
It's crunchified is the way that I would describe it to the max.
I love that word.
Okay, so that's the first track, and you're like, yeah, this is metal. You're like, woo, you got your horns up in the air with your fingers. You're like, yeah, I'm rocking. And then you get to the last track, Meadows of Heaven, and it's light and airy, and they're singing about the glories of heaven with a gospel choir in the background. You're like, wait a minute, you tricked me! I thought this was metal.
you're like crying, hugging strangers.
Yeah, and the poetry behind that song, Meadows of Heaven, is so beautiful. And I sent that to Sarah Beth, a friend of the podcast from several years ago, and I was like, you got to listen to this. This is symphonic metal. And she's like, oh, okay. And she's like, what? Yeah. And you guys do that as well with your music. And the song that I'm thinking of is Destiny Unfolding, because you listen to it. It's like, hey, you want to listen to some metal dudes? And you put that on there like, that ain't metal. And then it gets into it and it just really just grabs you, and then it gets crunchified in the middle. You got everything going on. You got the soaring vocals, and it's crunchy and soaring vocals and back and forth. Destiny Unfolding. Can you tell us?
I gotta add when you say the word crunchy, and Alicia knows this, but she's laughing. She knows exactly what I'm going to say. When I start writing music, right in the beginning stages, I'm just playing around. Sometimes I'm playing around with the keyboard. Sometimes I'm using GarageBand. I'm just getting some ideas down. I have no idea what the words are going to be. Okay. I'm not a lyricist. Alicia, she is beautiful. She absolutely knows what to do with the song, with words and meaning and stuff like that. I just totally come up with some kind of a name out of the middle of nowhere, just what I'm feeling at that particular time. And there was, Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Destiny Unfolding that I called Crunchy initially?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And straight ahead was Check It.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I'm looking back at my old files, and so as we were going through the song, the first couple versions of the song, I have it listed as Check It / Destiny Unfolding, and then when Alicia, she's coming up with the words, and we're actually kind of putting it together, and we're getting different versions. Eventually, we dropped off the crunchy part and just called it Destiny Unfolding.
You see, I really pay attention to your music. I'm a fan. I could sense the crunchy in it as I was eating my bowl of Captain Crunch. I was just crunching away. Can you tell us about that song, Destiny Unfolding? What is it that you are sharing with the listener that you want them to get? Because it's a very positive song. It's a very encouraging song.
Yeah. It's really a love story, and it's about our personal journey with the Lord. Just love's a journey with its promises to hold. You embrace deep, the deep things of life, and it will bring you home. So, just that line alone is kind of showing you, awaken to the truth lying deep in the stone, which is, Jesus in the tomb. And he's, basically in the tomb, but he went there for a reason, So it's basically, and then love's a mystery, precious days will unfold, written language that only hearts can know. It surrounds as it drowns every doubt. So, like you said before, that God is a mystery. This is all a mystery. I mean, we're just have like the tip of the iceberg, maybe not even that, of trying to figure out who he is. And precious days will unfold. It's this love relationship that takes time to learn about him. And it surrounds and drowns every doubt.
Love's a journey with its promises to hold you embrace deep. It will call you home, not to know every turn, every byway, but to lead you in time for today. Wake unto truth lying deep in the stone. You'll find the mystery unfold. Now is the season of change waiting. We are warned there is no time to waste. Come alive, we are brave. Now is the day to become. Take your place. All your days lead to now. Embrace Love's the mystery. Precious days will unfold. Written language only hearts can know. It surrounds as it drowns every doubt. So your soul sold to its destiny now. Wake unto truth lying deep in the stone. You'll find the mystery unfolding. Now is the season of change waiting. We are one. There is no time to waste. Come alive. We are brave. Now is the day to become. Take your place. All your days lead to now. Embrace hate. Tear away what you once knew. Let it fade. Wash away to pools of blue. Soaring possibilities will rise. The impossible is left behind. Soaring possibilities will rise. Tear away what you once knew. Let it fade. Wash away to pools of blue. Soaring possibilities will rise. The impossible is left behind. The impossible is left behind.
Another thing that is a characteristic of symphony and a symphony orchestra is something called resonance. And Dan, this is a term that we've used. It's like when we talk to guests like we're talking to today, it's like, whoa, that really resonates with me.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that caught me the first time I played in a symphony orchestra is I could feel the strings just vibrating through my feet. And it was an experience that I'll never forget. I'm like, oh, this is really, really cool. Don't want to do it as a profession, but this is really, really cool. Well, with a symphony orchestra, if you have a violin and all the strings next to each other, when one violin starts to play, very minutely, the other instruments will start to resonate what that instrument is playing without anybody playing it. And that's how it works between us and believers. When somebody, that spirit is moving, okay, we all start to resonate. Great. Yeah. And
you got some revelation on that one.
It's amazing.
I'm telling you what.
It's amazing what happens.
Help yourself to another shot of that Dayquil. That's really you're interfacing.
So God works, the way he works, the way his spirit moves is symphony. It's beautiful.
Oh man, that's good. That's
really
beautiful.
good.
It's beautiful.
I know the concept of the resonance frequency, but actually the way that you kind of described it and how the resonance frequency is sounded off of other people and other instruments is mind blowing. That was great. I'm going to keep that one. I'm going to keep that one in the back of my mind.
I don't know much about this, but I've heard that everything in the universe has a frequency.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that we're all tuned to the same thing, like everything and everyone.
Yes, and I'm glad you...
pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Alicia, because a lot of people are like, oh, that's New Age. Well, there's truth in New Age. The thing is what they do is they reject Christ in New Age. They reject... They completely... Yes. Now, the things, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwash. And this is something that you and I, Dan, were talking about yesterday, is you have to glean through everything. And where's the truth in here? Because God is so vast, and this universe that he made is so vast that we need to glean that truth to really understand. And it was my sister, and she has really been somebody who's spiritually encouraged me. She was born again after I was born again. And she grew faster than I did. While I was in the desert, she went through some things, and she was going through some medical things, and she learned about the resonance of the frequencies of the bodies in healing. And I was like, ooh, that kind of sounds New Agey. But when you look at Scripture, it's all in the Scripture, especially when it talks about the stones crying out. Yeah. That's one of the applications of that, is that stones, this whole earth, it does vibrate. It's a vibration. And even in the book of Genesis, when the Spirit started brooding over the waters, there was vibration and rhythm that was going on there when that brooding was going on.
Right.
Everything I have noticed about symphonic metal has meaning. There's nothing just random. It's not like you guys just put together an album cover. It's like, hey, yeah, this triangle and this circle looks really cool, or this is a nice picture. It all relates to the message that you're trying to portray, and the artwork that you guys have with your music and your albums is beautiful. It's almost lavish. Who does your artwork, and how does that factor into the songs? Do you develop that artwork after the songs, or is it during the process, or how does that all work?
So far it's happened after coming out of that, but who knows, maybe in the future it'll happen, that we'll be inspired by something.
So when a person puts music up online to actually, for purchase or for viewing, on the various platforms, what the publishing companies require is actually some sort of a cover art. You can't just give them the song without some kind of a visual. So the first song I believe we uploaded was Destiny Unfolding. I think we put both of them up near the same time, but I think Destiny Unfolding was first. I actually did the artwork, and I focused
I love it.
Yeah, I focused on the sun. And then I took our logo image and put it in the middle. And then I had another person in San Francisco do the artwork for the other one with the lady going across the water. It kind of looks like...
You have to say who he is, though. Come on. I mean, really cool divine appointments. Hello.
I know.
Who was it? You got me interested now. I'm piqued.
Yeah.
His name is John Serrato Jr., and I think he still lives in San Francisco. I really don't know, because that was a couple years ago.
Okay.
He's been doing it for like 15 years, and some of his clients included Motorhead, Anthrax, Slayer, 311, Megadeth, Grateful Dead, and probably a few others. Yeah, he did an absolute wonderful job. Alicia, can you kind of speak to that picture?
Well, he was asking us what we wanted, and initially he came out with something a little bit darker, and we said, we wanted to lighten it up and kind of gave, the red is like the blood, and it's almost like she's walking. I can't tell if it's, a desert.
Yeah.
And we said something about the path, right? And so we wanted to make sure that she was just, that there was some beauty in that and some life to it. But I love how he has her walking towards something, but you don't know what it is. And
Right.
sometimes that's just like life. I mean, that's the journey, is that we're walking sometimes, and it's that trust factor that is, whether we're in the desert or we're, stepping out on the waves and we don't know if we're going to sink, we're just kind of stepping out there and trusting, hey, have you got this, God? And yes, he's got it. So I love how I feel like he brought the beauty, but also the contrast in there, that life is a struggle. It's real. This is real, this stuff that we're going through. The last few years have been like, I've watched people drop like flies, meaning they're going through just the hardest times that they've ever gone through. And in those times, we just get this like strength, in our weakness, he's strong. So I think it really represents that. I don't know. What do you think, Joey?
Yeah, no, I think you're correct in that. I mean, there's a lot of interpretations. I really like that. It almost looks like
It just looks cool.
and it looks really cool. I got to say that the coolness of it in general is actually what drew me. But you can also see that she is above what could be interpreted as water, but it also kind of looks like it's fiery, and that going again tying into the symphonic metal, the metal portion of it could be actually the fire, and the symphony part of it is actually this person rising above it and still moving into the light or into a something not seen yet, but going in a positive direction.
Well, that's what I love about art, is that the person who's viewing it or listening to it gets to interpret it for themselves. It just kind of speaks to them in that moment where they're at, and you get more revelation as you go. You're kind of like learning, It's the human spirit. It's beautiful.
And God is the ultimate artist. And when you express that creativity, you're getting in touch with the divine. For me, Dan, I think it's this way for you. When we do a podcast, this is a form of art that we do. And every time we walk out of here, we feel like we've been touched by the Lord. And with what you guys are saying, I'm getting ministered to by all the things that you're saying. It's really helping put some context into some things that I've been wondering about for several years. And I'm getting encouraged, especially about that faith and trust, because I'm getting ready to do some leaps and bounds myself in the next couple months, where it's going to take a lot of trust, not in my flesh, but in what God can do and things that are going on in my own life.
Right.
And just hearing that and the art, people can be ministered to by looking at a picture. They can be ministered to by reading a book.
Yes.
They can be ministered to by listening to a song. They can be ministered to by listening, hopefully, to the Get Real podcast. I hope in some ways, And it's true, when you put art up online, Dan and I, we started to get more listens when we took our pictures down off of the artwork. I'm only kidding.
We were running there.
But that's one of the things that I do over here, is that when we do a podcast, I listen for the texture and the context of the podcast, what we're talking about, the tone of it, and base the thumbnail art off of what we're doing. And some of the times it's kind of scary looking because we're talking about scary things. Some of the times it's a little bit softer. A lot of times it's mystical, because you just can't get away from the fact that God is mystical. There's no way around that.
I want to say something about just symphonic metal. And when I look at it kind of to get more of an outside perspective, like I used to listen to a lot of punk and thrash and all kind of skater music, growing up and everything. Yeah. And I liked, a lot of classic rock and everything. But sometimes, to me, I'm not a metalhead of knowing like all the different genres, and there's a lot of different metal genres. When you start rattling them off, sometimes it's almost tedious. I'm like, I don't even, what is that?
Right.
I don't know the difference. But there's something very organic about symphonic metal. I sit there and think, what if a classical musician, one of the greats that you would have sitting on your piano, right? if they heard symphonic metal, I think it's a really organic progression. There is something there, in the sense that the clarity of utilizing usually female vocals above all the mid-range, above all the other frequencies. It's just shimmering right there on top of it. There's it's a broader dynamic as far as emotion. For example, I'm sure that like you mentioned Handel's Messiah. I'm sure, the preferences of kings or whoever was financing it, or he had to do what he did, but God moved on that. Metal is kind of like this freedom that it can go from primal, from a scream, all the way to the other side of bordering the ethereal. It's just got such a broad emotional frequency. It's kind of amazing. And I think it's organic. Like when I sit there, I'm thinking about the way that we keep using symphonic metal, and it makes it sound like it's this specific thing and not necessarily. I'm kind of giving an outsider's perspective because I was new to symphonic. I was new to symphonic metal with Glenn. Was like, man, you got to check out Nightwish. And then I was like, whoa, I loved all the different components. I like opera, I like Celtic, I like all these different things. To hear them all put together, and I said, what would Beethoven do at this concert?
WWBD?
What would Bach? That's a new bumper sticker. But what would they do? And I think they would be like, wow, this is louder, it's electronic, it's more powerful. But I think it would excite their senses in an organic way and not be some affront that was kind of just an artificial evolution of you're listening to something very strange. I think it's a beautiful, organic art form in that.
Dan, I appreciate that view. I really do, because if you listen to symphonic metal, it's almost in a way to me a return to classical. We're kind of regressing, going backwards, or should I say a restoration of classical.
There you go.
I believe it's a restoration, because when I listen to it, like Ghost River from Nightwish, that's an opera song.
Right.
They're an opera. They're going back and forth. They're conversing with each other, and then it gets crunchy, and then it goes back to the.
It's that whole frequency is broader.
Yes.
It can go from primal deathbed scream or all the way to the whisper of something very passionate, and it fits. And I'm like, that's amazing. And I don't think that in any other time in history that's been
people.
there.
Yeah.
Most people
I think
like
it really
it.
speaks to people. Yeah, because it's so human to feel both of those things and to feel them even within the same day, perhaps. You never know what happens or hits people.
And to kind of like tie back to what I said probably about a half an hour ago about the symphonic part of it is actually being God. And I sometimes close my eyes and think about, the cherubim and the seraphim that are around the throne of God.
Yes.
Are they going to be playing down-tuned guitars? Personally, I don't think so. What you will be hearing is very angelic. I don't know if you can call it female, but the sound is going to be closer to a symphonic type of a song or type of a movement. But the metal portion of it is the reminder of who we are and where we are on this earth and our humanity. And it's like, again, it's a blend of understanding where we're going, where we want to go, and that God is there in this music trying to pull us out from the metal portion of it.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about Revelation 4, it's talking about the throne room of heaven. And in that, it says there's thousands upon 10,000 angels surrounding the throne singing. And then you've got the 24 elders, and they're bowing down and throwing down their crowns and going, holy, holy. Right. And then there's, the cherubim that are just like crazy looking. I mean, this could be like an album cover.
Oh, yeah.
Symphonic metal. Then you have the peals of thunder. And to me, there's lightning and there's peals of thunder. I mean, it is just epic.
Yes.
And then there's a sea of glass. I mean, you just can't go any bigger than that. I mean,
I want to go there
crazy.
now. I want to go now.
And that's a rock concert right there.
It
exactly.
is. And not genre knocking, but that sounds more like symphonic metal than Southern gospel.
It does.
All day long, you know,
does.
and
Yeah,
it's like,
I mean, it's just fire and
Yes.
and yes, I mean, it's everything all put
No.
together. There's a big, huge emerald rainbow. I mean,
True,
it's
and
crazy.
I think it's also a reminder that we as people are not asked to be passive. We're asked to be very active in our Christian
Yes.
faith. I also kind of like Saint Michael. I mean, he's got the shield, he's got a sword, he battles all the time. You know, in the heat of the battle is very metal-like. You know, there isn't anything really, you know, sexy about, you know, getting
Yeah.
slain by a sword. But
Well, I love that we're called to be warriors, you know?
right.
We're called to be more than conquerors and warriors, and this picture of a soldier, you know, because life is a battle. It's just not always easy, and it's not always easy also in this world to keep your faith and, you know, within those struggles, because some of it is so much of feeling and just really. There's times like you were talking about, Glenn, about that time of the dark night of the soul that you had, where you're in that desert time and God is really pruning you, and you can't feel Him. And I remember hearing this sermon about the Song of Songs, the Song of Solomon, where there's a part where the beloved, the bride, that he's pulled away from her, the groom has pulled away from her, and there are times in our lives where God pulls away because He wants us to go deeper with Him. We get you know, really settled with everything, and we're just kind of like, hey, status quo, I'm good, I don't want to grow anymore, I'm happy. And He's like, no, I've got more for you. It might hurt a little bit at the beginning, or it might stretch you, and that feels like painful, but it's actually going to take you to a deeper place with me. And that's just like marriage and all of it. I mean, that is life. Yeah, I mean, I love this. I love that God is so passionate, and there's even scripture that talks about Him singing and dancing over us. I mean, picture that. I don't know what that looks like, but that's how much he loves us.
There's
Love it.
so much we don't know, and so much
Exactly.
that's.
this is a good crunchy podcast.
This is crunchified.
There's a lot of meat up in here.
Yeah.
This is
Underlying
crunchified.
theme of this is
You guys have another song that I want to share with our listeners. It's called Straight Ahead. Can you tell us about that one a little bit?
Alicia, you want to take that one?
Well, Straight Ahead is talking about the road being difficult at times. You know, just talking about how so we're predestined when we're called by the Lord. We're predestined, which is a mystery in itself. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And so it's basically just that struggle, the actual struggle of keeping our eyes on God. And I tried to change the path, to rearrange my future, to start a brand new day, but like a jilted love, it sought me. So that God is, you know, He's gonna keep seeking after us. And it says that we could even go down to the depths of the ocean and He would still find us, right?
Can't hide.
So, yeah, you know, like Job underneath, or
the
not
palm
Job.
tree.
yeah,
Jonah?
the palm tree. Jonah, yeah. Going underneath the palm tree, and God's like, no, I got you. I'm going to swallow you up, and I'll take you for a little ride in this fish's belly, you know. And
Something that's been stirring in me in the past couple of days, and this might be something that you're hitting on in this song, is because of God's grace, it's so sufficient. We don't realize the sufficiency of it. We can make a wrong decision because we always get caught up, what's the perfect will of God? And it's so difficult to
Right.
discern that sometimes. But His grace is so great that it's almost self-correcting in a lot of ways. We can start going one way, and then all of a sudden, because He's so good, He'll start making and arranging the circumstances to get us right back on track again.
yeah. And I love that He chases us. You know, that's crazy. He chases us, and we're learning to trust. My husband and I are learning to trust Him more. But that's there's a line in Straight Ahead that says, it's the operatic part that says, "We are familiar like lovers entwined."
Oh, right.
And I in Scripture it really compares marriage to our relationship with God. We are the bride of Christ, and lovers entwined. They're not just lovers that are intimate with each other, but they're entwined. I mean, you cannot separate these two. And even if you physically separate them, they're still entwined emotionally. Yeah, I mean, it's just that close.
Yeah, that's the intertwining and becoming one flesh that we see in
Yes,
the human.
exactly.
That's supposed to occur.
About the song, as we were going to put the songs together, and we would often come with new ideas, and Alicia would come up with a few vocal melody lines and a few things that would catch my attention. And I did the initial mixing, so I would take some of her ideas and I would add it in. I'd cut and paste and rearrange things, and it's been great working with her because she and I have this musical connection. It's like we kind of know where the song is going to eventually go to. We don't know exactly what it's going to be like, but we know what's good when we kind of hear it. And I kind of go along with that, and adding these bridges and adding these little hooks. And sometimes I hear it come with an idea and that I think is good. I add it in or cut it out, and it's a struggle in and itself of actually making the song, but in its finale, it comes out beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with any art form, you have to actually love the process.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just the finished product and now we're singing it. It's the process of creating that together and, all that's coming. And then when you partner with someone, I mean, that's just incredible to me is, they say like a 3-chord strand cannot be broken. So it's that. Once again, it's that symphonic thing that we're asked to partner with each other. We're asked to partner with God. I like the process. Great. Joey's fun. He's fun to work with, but he's a taskmaster.
Is he a slave driver? Is he like, Alicia, get back to work?
No,
Where are my lyrics?
No, he's sweet. You can tell Joey is awesome. I actually love working with Joey, and it's just really meant to be. I just really feel like this was ordained. But he actually is good for me because I'm ADHD, and he helps to keep the ball rolling.
Is he the linear one?
Going in a direction.
Is Joey linear one? Joey, you're the linear guy that just bulldozes right through?
Yes.
Dude,
Glenn, you know that.
We were separated at birth, brother. That is proof right there.
Yeah, he's getting the job done.
ADHD over here, and
the
dozer over here on my left. I've called Glenn. I was like, Glenn, you're a dozer. How many years have I been sitting there going? 20. He's like, we're going to have this out on April the 3rd. And you're like, and it'll happen. If it was up to me, I'd be like, oh, I think we have a podcast interview with somebody in Ireland. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, forgot the time change.
Man, having you guys on today has been an absolute blast. Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of resonance over here. Dan and I are like kind of, wanting to high five each other and, punch each other in the shoulder. This has been beautiful. So what we're going to do is for the month of March, which happens to be the month of my birthday, I'm going to be a little self-indulgent, and we are going to make, thank you. And you know what? A little known get real fact, Dan's birthday is the day before mine, when it's not a leap year. I know. So I think we were all separated. Yeah, we were all separated at birth. Now, Dan, did you play the trombone?
Did not.
Okay.
My sister did, so I messed around with it. I thought the little spit thing was pretty cool.
Hey, Alicia, you want to sing Happy Birthday to them? Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. I could sound like Marilyn Monroe. Or it could sound like, I don't know, like Bart Simpson. Or Happy birthday to you.
Oh, you do that so well.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
What's the matter with my voice? Yeah. I mean, I would have to do a character voice at this moment. I don't really have my own voice.
So for the month of March, you guys, Amaris, are our prophetic artists of the month. So for our listeners, they'll be able to go to our website at lithoscry, LITHOSCRY.com, and read about you guys and find out more about you. And we're going to put links up to your music. What are some other ways that our listeners can find out about you? Where can they find your music and even purchase your music?
There's a number of platforms. Probably what I normally tell people, the quickest one to do is actually go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/the band Amaris, and we have our videos and songs there. You can also go to a YouTube channel, Band Amaris. To find that website, to find the channel when you go into the YouTube, it's better if you don't put the space between band and Amaris for some reason. It's quicker to get that. You can also find it on Spotify and Google Music, I think, has it as well. Apple Music and all the main music platforms.
Yeah, and all my stuff is also linked to Amaris. I have Alicia at Amaris Band on Facebook, and then I have my website, my personal website that is Alicia Trowbridge-Boyd, so TROWBRIDGE, Boyd, BOYD, and it's got all of our music on there.
Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah.
Yes. Joey, we're going to be back with you in just a minute, and we're going to talk about some of the divine things that we're seeing in this new release, Apocalypse and Chill from Delain. So we will be back momentarily.
All right.
Yeah, thank you
guys.
so much.
Thank
It's been
you.
wonderful.
Get Real will be soon back.